a lot of discussions about the Ukrainian recovery, we still have decided that we would like to represent the vision of the Ukrainian civil society, of the Ukrainian think tanks, of the Ukrainian research centers about what the vision we have. And we will have Yuriy Romashko today, the acting director of the ERPC, then also the Oleksandra Betliy, the senior expert at the Institute for Economic Research and Political Consultations, and Nitzovich, the research director of the analytical center of DiXi Group. You can use the interpretation in Zoom, the questions throughout our events. You can leave all of the questions in our Q&A chapter, and we're really grateful for the financial support for the Open Society Foundation and the Renaissance Foundation, so that they've helped us to make this analysis possible. They've helped us to understand what it is that is needed for the sustainable green recovery of Ukraine, and who helped us with the publication. Our event is going to be lasting till 5:10 Kyiv time, and we have organized it as the presentation by our colleagues who's going to give us more information about the cookbook itself, and then later on you will have the time to pose the questions. Why we have called it a cookbook? Well, because we thought that all of the recipes of the recovery, for them to be the most practical and the most clear as possible. And I would like to pass the floor to Oleksandra Betliy to start the presentation. So please, Oleksandra, the floor is yours. Yes, I'm pleased to welcome everyone. Yes, for sure, we have tried to create a cookbook, and we've tried to create the certain understanding of what we would like to do, and we try to refer the restaurant ideas as well. So what we thought about the recovery, we wanted to create it as the restaurant, the one that you would like to meet, the one that you would like to get back to, the one that you would like to use your recipes at home, the one that you would like to go to, and the one that you would like to recommend to the others to visit as well. When we're talking about the recovery in Ukraine, we have to understand that the most important thing is about the sustainability and resilience, and we have to talk about that the resilience has to be as a healthy diet. It has to support the long-term and resilient healthy development of economy, but not just to be a short-term remedy. We understand that there might be certain differences that will be applied in the fast recovery, and that there might be some differences in the issues of a long-term recovery that will start slightly later, but the most important ingredients that we can outline is, first of all, the works of property. Everyone agrees to that. So this is something that we have to know, that Ukraine has to own the processes and ownership of the processes. The transparency that we're talking about as well, being the needs-oriented, because we're not doing this recovery for the recovery's sake. We're doing it for the sake of the people, so that it will be comfortable for the people to live in this country, so they would like to use the services in this very country. And what is very important as well, we have been talking a lot today that we have the support of the international donors. We need the support of the private capital. Without the participation of the businesses, there's no recovery possible. The participation of the businesses means creating the new jobs in Ukraine. There might be the certain conditions there, and there might be certain conditions that we're going to mention. We are recovering not something that we're used to have, but we're building better. We need a lot of trust, and we're talking about that as well. And we're not going to be mentioning that in details, because I do believe that everyone understands that. All of that means that we want to go to the European Union as well. So the European integration is also in the core of it. The directive, the rules, the principles, the objectives, they have to be mentioned in every step of our recovery, and we have to work with that as well. So the universal recipes and all of the kitchen as an all kind of recovery. We're mixing the high quality ingredients, we're following, tracking the processes, and we're starting to cook it straight away. The recovery should take place already as we go. We know that there has been already 13,000 subjects that have been recovered in Ukraine. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of information available to monitor it in quality, but that is something that will be forward. When we're talking about the ownership, we need to talk about the team. The team has to be made of the best people. As we see that, and as the point of of our consortium, the main cook has to be the Prime Minister of Ukraine. The sous chef, if we'll continue the restaurant analogy, is the Ministry of Recovery. The main procurement is going to be in the mandate of the ministry. The Agency of Recovery and the territorial communities, of course, with the Ministry of the Finance, because they're going to be providing the main finances for the recovery and development. And we have the additional cooking assistants. And what is the most important, during the preparation of all of that, we need to have a good supervision, a good overview. That is an important role for the civil society, for the international community, for all of our colleagues in that. So when we're talking about the ingredients, we have to understand that we are buying the most high quality products. Quite recently, our consortium has visited Brussels, and we have started the discussion about what the sustainable recovery is. And we believe that the sustainable recovery, the green recovery, requires a lot of financial support. And it's not only the question for the government that have to understand that, but the question to the donors as well. For the donors to be clear that the high quality, resilient, and sustainable green recovery is much more expensive than we're just trying to cover the main gaps. And we will need additional financial support for that. We understand that the financial support is limited, and right now, especially when we're talking about the short-term perspectives, when we're talking about the 2023, we understand that we need to have the clear priorities outlined, both now and in the future. We need to recover and restore a lot of things, but the clear priority lists will help us to find a joint understanding inside of the country and help us to find the understanding with our donors who's going to help us financially support this recovery. We need to have the clear recipes, the clear understanding. What is it that is going to be recovered? And it was really good for us to learn that the Agency of the Recovery and Restoration, they have already said that certain projects, they will have the specific clear instructions. For example, we're going to have a standard scheme for the recovery of and the reconstruction of the hospitals, the one that are going to be used as a template for the others, and that's going to be the source of the savings as well. And we need to include the standards of the green and sustainable recovery into those instructions and templates as well. The good ingredients are that was going to be transparency, and my colleague Yuriy is going to tell about that, but I'm going to mention the two other ingredients that are important, the capacities. When we're talking about the capacities, we need to talk about the capacities on both the central level and on the level of the communities, and there's something that cannot be emphasized more. The amalgamated communities are the most important part that compose the elements of the recovery. Without the communities, recovery is not possible. The community knows what is needed locally, what has to be restored, and in what way it can be restored. We understand that we now do not have enough capacities in the communities, because certain communities that have been the mostly damaged by the military actions, we do not have the people that might create the high quality projects, the high quality feasibility studies. So that means for us that this is one of the elements that requires our work, and the Agency of the Recovery and Restoration has to create those capacities that are needed. So we need the people who's going to be providing the capacities and knowledge that is needed, and the one who's going to be providing the support for the communities to be able to complete their projects. But we have to outline here, we're not taking back these civic processes. The agency will only help the communities to implement the projects that they don't have enough capacities yet. When we're talking about the communities, that's a very important role as well. The communities know better what are the needs locally. The communities know best what kind of educational services, for example, they need locally, what kind of medical services are needed locally. So that is why decentralization, building the capacities in the communities, is one of the most important elements of the cookbook. And we're hoping for the communities to take leadership, and the civil society organizations and the international aid to play an important role for the community to build their capacities as well. I also wanted to mention that we need to build the capacities of the communities, but not only build the temporary projects that can or only work with the projects and then go away from the community. How can we do that? We need to engage local people to the processes more. We're talking about, for example, using the participatory budgets as an important tool. And as I mentioned before, it is important to engage the businesses, and we understand that we need businesses. We have talked about the evaluation of the World Bank that Ukraine needs around $14 billion for the recovery. We understand that we will not receive all of the financial support from the state, and we need the investment from the private sector. We're not only talking about the foreign investment, but we're talking about the Ukrainian domestic investments as well. So that is why we do believe that we need to develop the projects with the localization ideas, but not the kind of localizations that we mentioned before in the legislation, like using the Prozoro procurement only, but we need to engage Ukrainian companies, not just getting the other companies with their people, with their human capital, but we need to help the businesses to develop here. We need to develop the PPP projects. And when we're talking about the Ukrainian and international businesses working in Ukraine and continue working and developing in Ukraine, what is important is to have the insurance against the military risks. The ministry has already started the working on the insuring processes, but they're way too slow, and we have to work better on that. I would like to stop with that and would like to pass the floor to my colleagues. Yes, thank you, Oleksandra. And I wanted to also mention that, yes, the communities and decentralization, they play an important role in the recovery and in our cookbook as well. We do believe that even on the level of the documents, the participation of the community should be very significantly outlined. And the private sector has to be also in the attention of that. And all of the donorship projects, and it doesn't really matter how they're going to be working with the governmental level or local level, they have to be oriented to engaging the private Ukrainian businesses, just as all of the projects right now, they need to have the component of, for example, the gender equality element or the green elements in it. I would like to invite Yuriy Romashko from the Advocacy and Analytics Institute, and Yuriy is the professional on the civic control and transparency on the state spending. So Yuriy, the floor is yours. Yes, I hope colleagues you can hear me. I just want to make a clarification. Can you see the presentation I'm sharing? Yes, we can see everything's okay. We can see that we have the ingredients for the tasty dish. Yes, I made a strategical mistake. I didn't have a meal before, and I'm looking at those photos that we have in the presentation. It's kind of a challenge for me because, I don't want to talk about the principles or anything else because I'm really hungry. But trying to be serious, we now talk a lot about what kind of reconstruction should look like, what kind of recovery should we take. And we understand that one of the fundamental important things is the trust, and we're talking about this trust a lot, the trust inside of the country from the taxpayers, the trust from the side of the international partners that providing their support to us, both humanitarian sector and in military sectors and other ways possible. And our task as a country is to preserve this trust and to think about in what way we can accelerate and preserve this trust further on. It is one of our main tasks, and we understand that transparency is something that will help us to provide this trust so that everyone would see everything, everyone would see that every step, every stage of the reconstruction will be visible, and so that all could be seen. Moreover, we're living in a digital world, so we're living the certain digital trace in our society as well that is going to be really hard to hide. So that is why I wanted to talk about the transparency and wanted to talk about in what way we can reach the transparency and provide the transparency that is needed, because this is the highest framework, the accountability and transparency. And I wanted to outline the two most important components. The first component, maybe I'm going to be the representatives of the governmental and public sector in a way, because I would like to say that in the last 9 years after the revolution of dignity, Ukraine has done a lot in building the anti-corruptional infrastructure and by introducing the certain reforms and building the institutions, the public governance sectors. And Ukraine has done a lot in the digital maturity. We made a very big step, like for example, Prozoro, the world-renowned procurement system that is one of the best, if not the best in the world. And it has incorporated the principles of the transparency property. We have the Prozoro sales that is working with the sales of the state property. We have the DIA system that has right now more than 20 million users. The digital IDs, the digital documents, driving license, there is an e-health system. We can continue in this list, but all of this is a very good basis that we can and we should use in the reconstruction of Ukraine right now during this urgent quick stage, because that is important. And working with the second component, I like this approach that is currently being used by Ukrainian civil society and Ukrainian government. We're not trying to reinvent the bicycle because we're using the already existing solutions and using it. But on the other hand, we're trying to create something that didn't exist before and something that can be used as the role model for the other countries in the world. Wanted to mention this an important moment about this dream, the restoration system of accountable management. This is the system that has been provided by the BRDO, Transparency International, the RISE Partnership, the Ukrainian government, as the Ministry of Recovery, that has all been supported by that. And right now we already have the process of introducing this system into action. So what is an important value of this solution that is offered? Because every stage of the reconstruction, it has a certain digital solution that is already available or that will be created. We understand that we're starting with, first of all, evaluating the costs. We have the register of the damaged or demolitions damage to demolition property that has some specifics of this work, but it's an important tool that the system uses. Because we're not only speaking about the digital solution, we're talking about the ecosystem that is fully digitalizing the whole life cycle of the reconstruction projects. When everything starts with, that I've already mentioned, with verifying the damage that has been made, and we have the next stage, like planning, for example, and we can use the geospatial systems for that. We have the public discussion, and we can use DIA for that. We have the procurements, and we can use Prozoro for that. We have the spending OUA just to verify every transaction that is being made. So basically, all of this system, it takes into consideration with all of the solutions available, and it creates the specific user interface for all of the communities, whether it's communities or whether those investors, and we're going to talk about that as well. So digitalization is a very big value for those projects. The next important thing, that all of those projects are going to be consolidated into this one project bank, or like the one big window, whatever you would like to call it, in whatever way you would like to call it. This is there's going to be a verified register of the projects that gives you a clear outline of all of the existing projects. You can prevent any kind of double spending or whatever that is, notwithstanding of the sources of the financial support or who initiated this project. You can have the access to almost all of the needed information. For example, you're an investor and you would like to support the project in a certain community, and you can see also the interest from the community side. They would like to prepare the high quality project as best as possible, because this is going to be the marketplace where you are going to be competitive with others for your project. The better project you will have, the better capacities you will show, the better you will show that your community is transparent, publishing the resolutions, it has the public hearings, it has the investment passport. There might be a lot of other features that can be used. That would be the interest of the community to be transparent and to be open-minded. And so they will have the opportunity to receive the financial support. Even if your project is not #1 in the rating, it doesn't mean that you will not receive the financial support for that. Not going to get into the details of the system because it is a different discussion that has to take place, but I know that the developers, they might talk about that. My colleagues from the BRDO, from RISE, they can talk about that better. But that's overall very, very important from both the sides of the community and the investors, and from the side of government as well. That's all about the data that you can use and that will help you to receive a lot of additional opportunity with that. I have already started talking about that. The transparency is going to help us to build the trust, and we need to increase all of that, not just to preserve it, but to multiply it, to make it bigger. And of course, the dream system and other solutions are very important, but I think what is important as well, that every community has to have a clearer understanding that they have to be open, because the communities are the project initiators, and each of the communities that are going to be the owners of their reconstruction. We have to have a clear understanding of that when the plans are being built. And we have a clear understanding, and Oleksandra has mentioned that in her speech, that we should not only just rebuild as it was, but to build better, to modernize everything that we've had, to make it better, to make it greener, to make it more sustainable. We're all moving into the better directions, and we're doing a lot on the integration, European integration path. And I do believe that we have to consider the reconstruction as an important component on our way, on our journey to the European Union. So all of the standards that are practiced in the European Union, it is important for us to implement those standards in Ukraine as well. So when we're talking about building back better, it's clear that we all support this principle. The most important principle, how we can implement it on the specific solution level, on the specific communities level. And here we know that there's a lot of challenges possible, or maybe we can say not the challenges, but the tasks that we have to complete. First of all, we have a limited timing. We have limited financial resources available. We have financial human capital available. So what we're doing, we're trying to be human-centered. We want to get people coming back to Ukraine. We have to do that as fast as possible, because the longer the people are abroad, the harder it will be for us to help them to come back, to motivate them to come back. We have to make it the best as possible, but we have to do that as fast as possible as well. So we have to think about the balanced approach of how we can do that under the reality that we're existing right now. Oleksandra has mentioned that we have the new report of verifying the damages and the losses and the costs that we've had due to the war, and we have approximate calculations of how much money is needed for the fast recovery. But we understand that the green recovery is expensive. We're talking about the usage of different materials, if we're talking about the practicality, and we have to include that into our planning as well. So if we'll have some time today to have a clearer discussion about those practical challenges of how we can integrate these principles of building back better on the specific, on the level of the specific solution, practical solutions of how to make it work, that would be great as well. So thank you, dear colleagues. I will stop with that and will pass the floor to the next colleagues. Yes, I think Yuriy, I hope that Roman is going to tell us more about how we can integrate the energy efficiency and environmental principles in the build back better principles. But I would like to have a comment as well from my side, because everything that Yuriy has said is very clear and important. All of us, we have to understand that this trust that is built by transparency is a main ground that Ukraine will have the financial resources for the recovery. If we will not want to have the trust, the financial resources will not be provided as well, because with our own power, that's up to $400 billion of our needs that have to be compensated. Ukraine will not be able to cover it with our own efforts. So we need to have the trust with the partners. And when we have been to Brussels, and Oleksandra has mentioned that, in the Budget Committee of the European Parliament, the frequently asked questions was, whether can we trust you? Can we trust you? Can we trust you with that money to be used according to the needs? Who's going to be controlling how the money is going to be used? So transparency is for the best interest of everyone, the interest of community, the interest of the government, the interest of every single person in Ukraine, and every Ukrainian in our own position. We have to do whatever that we can in order to support this transparency, in order to provide the full transparency there. So yes, trying to be the moderator once again and taking the hats of the analytic as well. I would like to remind you that you have the opportunities to ask your questions in our Q&A section, in our chats. So let us start the discussion as well. Please let us know what you think about it. What is it more that you would like to talk about? So, and I would like to have these questions from the Q&A sector already and pass the floor to Roman Nitzovich, our next speaker from the DiXi Group. Okay, Roman. going to read this question. And we know that the green recovery is important, but at the same time, the European Green Deal is a very important element. So Ukraine has also the climate goals, even though they're not as ambitious as the European goal. But the European Union has a very ambitious goal about decreasing the impact and adapting to the new environmental policy. Whether the climate neutrality question is going to be additional ingredient in that, and I know that you're going to tell us more about the recipes on recovery of energy sector. Maybe you would like to give us more understanding of the climate as well. Roman, please, the floor is yours. Yes, thank you very much, Maria. Well, yes, I would like to agree that the goals have been very non-ambitious. We have criticized that as well. And at the same time, we've understood that our goals of the climate neutrality that have to be postponed from 2060 to 2050 as the whole European Union. But in the same time, what we have seen with the war, we understand that after the war, we'll have a lot of demolished objects that are not going to be creating the CO2 emissions or the other elements. And thus, we can even overdo the goals that we have even posted for ourselves, and our goals might be even more ambitious than we have posted for ourselves. But we know that the economy is going to be recovering itself. We know that we're going to create a lot of steel production, and we're going to provide the thousands of tons of cement and concrete so that we will be able to stop the construction. We're talking about the big industrial objects that are going to have a certain impact for the environment as well. So we have to make sure that the recovery is not going to get us into a situation where the when the pollution is going to be increased. So we've had to make this decoupling. So we have to make our recovery as low impacting the environment as possible. And even if we are aligned in these principles with the European Union, the recovery should help to become greener, but not prevent us from being green. Getting closer to the energy recipes, I hope that you can see my screen. Yes, we can see your presentation, and you can even make it full screen. That would even be better. Okay, speaking about the recipes in the energy, what we were hoping here, we wanted to follow the Build Back Better principle, the one that means that we would like to go to sustainable, resilient, greener energy system that would help us to get closer to following the climate goals that we have outlined and the membership goals that we have outlined and the goals of our energy security. So when we're talking about the dish of the energy system of the future, then what we're talking about, we've first of all been based on what we have today. As of today, we have a lot of demolitions of the energy objects or the occupation of certain parts of the energy systems as well. There might be different scenarios for the end of the war, but we have a clear understanding that the future of the energy system of Ukraine, it has to adapt, it has to change as well. It has to be more decentralized. So it has to be, we have to have more generational units with lower capacities, and so our energy system has to be changed as well as the gas transporting systems as well. We have to rebuild it as well, and we have to rebuild it as well, so that because we will understand that we will take down we will then use the renewable gases or the synthetic gases, the one that do not create additional pollutions. So thus, these two big infrastructural systems that will require a lot of additional investments. Maybe the investments will not be that huge in the closest future, maybe in the perspective, in the lifespan of 1 or up to 3 years, but it will require the more investment in the long-term perspective. We need to mention as well the opportunity of the data access. The sector that works with the critical infrastructure, the one that is connected to the lives of every person in Ukraine, and we understand that a lot of data has been closed because of the war. But we have to again take care about the security. But our analytical center, we have analyzed 258 data sets out of the 23 users, and our recommendation would be 151 of those data sets are closed and are confidential as of now. But our recommendation that we understand that the 102 data sets can be published as of now, because publishing of those data sets did not cause any risks or any threats. 38 with some certain amendments, and 11 should not be published while we are still in the martial law. But we have to understand that if we would like to play according to the European rules, that we need more information, we need to collect more information, and we need to provide the free access to more of information. We're talking about the integrity and transparency of the wholesale markets. And I also wanted to speak about the environmental issues and challenges, because we have kind of launched the system, but the systems have to be set out, the systems of the reporting and the and measuring the emissions. Having this kind of informational components, it will be easier for us to engage additional investment. It will be easier for us to get our dish prepared. The next moment, speaking about how it should be cooked, how we're going to have more and more objects coming from the renewable energy. We understand that if we will not resolve the existing problems in the market, then we will not be able to engage the investment that we're all talking about. And in time, we understand that we should take down certain regulations that we have right now for the both energy and the gas markets, and we should gradually move to a freer model when the investors will see the opportunity to return on the investments. When I'm talking about the investors, I mean not only the big companies that have enough resources and capacities to engage additional capitals, but I'm also talking about the smaller investors. If we're talking about the decentralized energy system, then it's quite obvious that there's going to be a key role of the communities in that as well, and the key roles of the citizens as well as the prosumers, the one that can both consume and produce the electricity on their own. And we have to know that we need a specific support schemes for both the electricity and in the heating generation as well. For example, in Germany, in Poland, and the other countries, there is an important boom right now with the heating pumps. So due to the big high prices on gas for the last year, everyone are using the heating pumps because that's cheaper and more environmental friendly. The same thing about the solar stations that are being popular once again. So they do have this support systems, they have the additional discounting loans, and we have to think about that as well. Moreover, they're talking about the empowering the usage of the renewable resources. So we should not only take the best of their best practices and experiences, but we have to go even faster. Talking about the money, because it's quite clear that as the regulations will be better, that we also need to stop the tariff populism on the markets. What I mean is about the natural monopolies and the main operators of the grid. If we would like to have the investments in the grid, if we would like to provide the smart meters for our users and for our customers, then it's quite clear that the grid operators, they need to have the tariffs that will help them not only to pay the salaries to their employees and buy additional technical fuels for the use, but also to give them the opportunity to invest something for the development of the grid. Otherwise, we'll have more and more losses in the grid, and we're going to weaken the energy system. It's going to be vulnerable. We have all understood the value of an integrated national energy system, and we do understand that we need to empower it, we need to improve it. So we started doing that only starting with October last year. Unfortunately, only when being attacked by the drones, some of the elements were out of order. And of course, the question of the security. So right now, the system of protecting the critical infrastructure is only on paper. Right now, we only have the corresponding institution that is going to be responsible for that, but we have to work on that in order to build a resilient system. The principle, the energy efficiency is first of all. This is the key principle for the European Green Deal, and it's quite clear that when we're talking not only about the recovery of the energy system, but the residential sector as well, because this is the best the most important, the most urgent needs and the most damages are there. So we have to talk about building on the highest level of energy efficiency. So right now in our norms, we are reflecting on the new security norms, on building the shelters, but there's not that many highest needs on energy efficiency that have been outlined, which also sets us a little bit aback because we have this demand on the fast recovery, so making this residence fast and cheap for both the people and the state who's going to be partly recovering that. But no one is talking about what would be the exploitation cost of that, because you can build the cheap residential housing, but it's going to be very expensive for you next. The same thing about our virtual kitchen, for example. You can take the old second-hand freezer or you can use the second-hand oven, but it's going to be providing you this kind of invoices for the electricity that it would be better for you to invest some more money in buying something new and more energy efficient. So this principle of energy efficiency, first of all, has to be implemented in a way that, first of all, we are investing the modernization of the hospitals, schools, and other infrastructural objects that are important for the life of the community. And then we can calculate and think about the new systems of the generation of both electricity and heating that are going to be working for the optimized energy consumption already. Otherwise, we're going to be reconstructing our energy system twice or three times more because we will not have a clear understanding what would be the level of energy consumption in the end. We have to start with the consumers. We have to reduce the consumption wherever is possible. I think I will stop with that. Thank you for your attention. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Roman. The green energy efficient recovery, that's the most important thing for us, but it's very expensive, unfortunately. So the priority will be different, and we'll hope that we will have enough money for that. And if Russia will pay. We hope that Russia will do that. Okay, so dear audience, once again, I wanted to invite you to ask the questions. We have the chat, we have the Q&A chat, we can start the discussion, we can talk to all of the participants of our panel today. And I will start with the questions that we've had during the registration. There must have been a question that I really liked about the questions as for the big cities as Kharkiv is, for example. I think that you can take this question one by one. Just let me know if you would like to answer this first. But we understand that Kharkiv might not be the trade or industrial center and a big transport city. The city of the students is also under doubt because most of our institutes have been damaged by the shellings and the close location to the border, making people fear that. So do we have the project of reconstruction in these cases? What should we start with? Maybe the world has already the good cases or bad cases of the recovery of the cities that have lost their previous census due to war. It's a very sad and painful question for all of us, but I think that is something that really refers to all of us. Any of my colleagues would like to comment upon this question? Well, maybe I can start, but I think that Yuriy maybe will continue and maybe about the experience of the other countries as well. Yes, this question is definitely a painful question. And you know, when I've heard this question, I've recalled the presentation of the Prime Minister of Japan, if I'm not mistaken, that was last year, because like this is the question that has been posed. Should we recover something that is located very closely to the borders with Russia? And here we're talking about this moment that, you know, Ukraine is the owner of the processes, and this is the decision that we have to make on our own. If we're talking about Kharkiv, so what we see right now in Kharkiv today, even despite the cities being located quite close to the Russian border, there's quite a lot of shellings right now. The amount of population there is very high. And compared to what we've had before the full-scale invasion as well. So why is that? Because some people, they have came from other territories, from other smaller cities to Kharkiv as the internally displaced persons as well. So we do understand the city will continue its existence. We understand that it has to be developed as well. From what I know, what is now being discussed, that maybe the change of the paradigm of what can be located in the city. For example, that might be for some time functioning as the military city, not the student city, probably because, yes, there's quite a lot of institutes that have left, and we need to provide our youth with a very good conditions for the study because that the youth is our future. What can be done and has to be done? We're talking about that it is once again it's a military question because we need more of the resources to protect for the military protection for those cities. We need to have more military capacities there to protect the city from the possible damage and possible threats that might be coming. But the city has to develop. This once again, this is about the looking of the census, and this is a long-term process, and it also will depend on when the full-scale war is going to stop, and in what way it's going to stop with us, what kind of in what status it's going to end for Russia as well, because it will also depend. The further development of this city will depend on what's going to happen in Russia as well. But we need to engage the civil society for the census, for working on the census, and there is a question in the Q&A right now of how the communities, in what way communities can do something if we now have the military administrations there as well. We have already thought about that. We have the mechanisms of the e-democracy, the public hearings and the public discussions that are already there. We have a lot of different surveys that might be conducted on the territories of communities. There is the participatory budget moments that also help the citizens to apply for certain projects and to receive financial support. And I think that is something that has to be recovered right now and has to be worked on right now. This is something that has not really changed since last year, but this tool will help us to communicate with the community and to understand the needs of the communities for the future developments. Then there is a question of prioritization. As I've already mentioned, there's a lot of priorities that we have right now. There's a lot of things that we have to recover as soon as possible. And that is why the government right now, with the civil society organizations, with the international partners, we're building this formula of finding the priority. And we need it so that we would have this as a good formula, so we would have a clear understanding of what it is that we're choosing for the financial support. And this prioritization, understanding the limited financial support is going to be very important. Yes, Sasha, thank you very much for this answer. We have a lot of questions actually. So I would like to ask all of our participants to be brief in their answers so we would be able to cover all of the questions. And we'd like to comment about the Kharkiv and Mariupol as well. From my position as well, in Europe after the Second World War, there's a lot of cities that have been recovered from zero, from foundation, from stones, and there's a lot of cities that have been rebuilt like that. And if you will go there right now, then you will see that all of those cities that have found their own census, and I know that Kharkiv will find its census as well, and Mariupol will find its census, and the smaller cities in the north of Ukraine, in the east of Ukraine, and in the south of Ukraine as well. The next question from the chat. Recovery, the total communities that has been fully damaged, mid damaged, and the small damage, they all need recovery. So what kind of community should we start with the recovery? What communities can create the projects and have the trust from the investors? And partly Oleksandra has started answering this question when she's spoken about the prioritization and the closeness to the conflict zones. But this is a separate question. I would like to complete it with the next question as well. There was a question from Svetlana. In order for the community to apply for the projects, the communities need to be taught how to do that. Who's going to teach them to create this project, especially understanding the energy efficiency, how the community is going to be. Okay, I will just postpone the next question slightly on, but let us talk about who has to build the capacities of communities, who they should ask for additional help when they're going to be applying on the projects, the community that has been fully demolished or with a small damages, how they can build their capacities in project making. Okay, dear colleagues, Yuriy? Yes. Yeah, okay, Roman, you can start. I will add up to that. Yes, Yuriy, we're going to have a big question, so maybe we'll start with Roman first. Yes, I will just say that, yes, there's no capacities on the ground right now, that's for sure, because, yes, some of the people have been mobilized, some of the people are in the war, some people have left, and even for those departments, let us say, or the units of the local authorities that might be responsible for the energy planning, and they don't have the capacities on the ground right now. So it's quite obvious that we need to recover the capacities as well after the war. For us as an organizations, we have a plan. Like, for example, we're going to help a couple of communities and we will help them to implement the energy plans as well. And this is something that's connected to the energy efficiency as well, and something that will help the communities to plan their consumption on a smart way, and they can plan their development in a smart way. And once again, answering this question in the most realistic way, to start with the communities with a small level of damage, because they're just better renovations, it's easier and faster. The fully damaged and demolished, the question is first, like, should we recover something? Should we recover the whole infrastructure? Should we recover the whole social infrastructure in the community? So we're talking about the administrative buildings providing the administrative services, the schools, the houses, the cultural institutions for the communities that might not have the 80 or 90% of the population return. So maybe that's something that might not be done. So maybe we can think about, for example, taking the centers of the communities to the new places, or providing the same services in a different format, not to create just one. There's a couple of schools, but to create, like, for example, a one integrated school for the bigger location. So that's a question out of the scope of the community in some point when we're talking about the higher level of damages, and goes to the level of the state, because we need to talk about what is it that we're not going to rebuild. So what we're going to be just, recovering from the debris and starting to recultivate this territory in a different way, covering some other needs, for example, providing the industrial needs as well. So we have to talk about that as well. Yuri, you wanted to add to that? Well, that is a question for the separate discussion, the capacities of the communities, because there's a lot of things that can be said, and what Roman has said right now. Maybe we should, like, for example, just to do a little bit of roof maintenance, and it would be in way easier than what has been done. I take a look at some questions in the chat. Like, the first thing that I wanted to get back, first of all, the community making their own recovery plan. They're going to be responsible for the recovery of themselves. We know that there's the policies, the agencies that will help them, but let us be realistic. You should not wait for somebody to do something instead of you. You have to do something on yourself. Talking about this trust of the community, and I'm not trying to be skeptical about this question. I don't like this the way the question is made built. We should not build. We should think about it in a different way. Those communities that have been working on their transparency, on their openness, who dealt with some basic things, like what they did. Like, for example, we'll publish some reports. This will be very good right now. The communities that have already completed this homework, it will matter a lot. We do understand that the ministries, they have a clear understanding of that. We're now making this mobile brigades and teams from these expert pools. For example, the experts on the energy efficiency, the experts on the anti-corruptional compliance, on the experts of some certain design and urban qualifications, the ones that are going to be in the communities, and of course communities to proclaim and talk about themselves, so that they would have the professionals visiting those communities as well. We have the Agency of Recovery that has been organized, that is going to have its regional offices opened as soon as possible. We have to understand that those are the service organizations for the communities that will provide a different type of support, from the basic consultations up to some clear ideas, for example, being the owners and recovery partners, or up to something. So the communities has to build this collaboration as well. We know that we don't have the fully track of business processes. We're now being developing all the things, and it's a live lab right now. We don't have a lot of answers ready now. We have to understand that as well. So right now we're trying to take down the fire, which is natural. But as the time goes by, it's going to change step by step, and we have to work on that. So I think it's not an answer, but more of a reflection on this issue. Yes, thank you, Yuri. That's a very important comment from your side as well. But okay, we have talked to our donors and a couple of the big donors that are working in this format with the cities. This homework that you mentioned, the availability of the strategy, the availability of the planning of how the territory use, the availability of the strategic documents, and even having a person who speaks English in the local authorities, that's something that really supports the community. It really actually builds the community's capacities for the donors' investment to be provided. And you can go to the Hovella project by the USAID. They're working with the communities. You can, for example, ask them what they can offer. We have the EBRD that works with the regions and regional development for the big cities. There are some projects, the twinning projects in the Euro City initiatives. So those things are available. They are decentralized. So you just have to Google it. You just have to sit on your laptop and look for those opportunities for you. But those opportunities are there. The questions about the capacities and the opportunities to do this homework, and maybe the communities should get together, should address the Ministry of Recovery with that, and to send this claim for this kind of educational project for the communities that will be organized on the central level, maybe. Oleksandra, you would like to add something to that? Yes, we have the Yuriy project, that's the European project as well, but we don't have Olena Povanko. She was, and Olena, so when we've met with international partner, Olena has mentioned that it's important to provide the financial support for the communities after they have been through certain training, just to make the communities to understand that they need this capacity, they need this sustainability to motivate them as well. We have the European Investment Bank that have started certain projects for providing the investment to specific communities, and the European Investment Bank are working on that. So this is a big international bank that works on that. But what is important in this case, as for me, not even if the community is going to ask how we can build the capacities, that's already the big benefit for the community. Because as of now, unfortunately, not all of the community, they have a clear understanding that they need to build those capacities, and in order for the recovery to be successful. Thank you. We'll get to the next question. Maybe that will be the question to Yuriy. In what way community is going to monitor and control the recovery processes? What kind of tools we might use through DIA, through what kind of other tools, except for voting the projects through DIA, are available for the community? And maybe the certain questions from the registration list, in what way the average citizens who do not have the connections with managing the state can help with the recovery of Ukraine. So Yuriy, the floor is yours. Yes, I maybe can start, and my colleagues may help me that, or like, in what way, who, what kind of tools we can use, and let us try to think about that. So first of all, we have to understand what is it that we need to monitor, because there are certain decisions that are being made, the budgeting processes, the way how we use the money. There's a lot of things that we can monitor. The work of the commissions that's going to be created. There's going to make the issues on recovering the costs of the living of the residential building damage. That's the contest. So once again, it's clear that a lot of things that are happening right now, they don't have a clear understanding in what way it's going to be made later on. I wanted to start with saying that I wanted to establish the importance and the role of the counting palette of the Commerce Chamber of Ukraine, because they're in an important moment of how it's going to, how all of the money for the reconstruction will be used, and that have a certain limited capacities on how they can monitor the money use locally, and maybe because they not able to monitor all of it, but the role of this body and these institutions in monitoring is very important. But we have to work on this accounting chamber work. Another point, the civic society organizations locally, let us not forget about those. They have to have their say, and they have to have their role, and they have to build this framework of the monitoring. We know that we have the already digital solutions. We have this with the DREAM system that will include these existing systems in there. And I know that some of my colleagues are working already in some additional tools for you to be used in the system. That all will be there. That's all being built, and we will use that developments as well. We have the regional solutions locally. There are some communities who have some better capacities already. Some have worse capacities. Some of the communities have already some digital solutions that will help them to monitor the expenses already. Some people are already publishing all of the spendings and all of the income and their resources. So for the organization locally, they will need to take care of these databases that have been published before, and they have been partly classified right now. That might be helpful as well. So sometimes they might have, for example, forgotten to publish, but there's sometimes there was intentional. So then it's not being published right now. So what I mean, right now we have to understand what would be the scope of what it is that we would like to monitor, and then we will have to think about in what way we're going to be doing this. There's digital tools, reporting tools. So the most important thing is for us to understand what is it that we would like to monitor and what we should pay additional attention to. Yes, thank you, Oleksandra. That's you. Would like to raise your hand? Yes, I would like to be very brief in commenting this issue as well. So, all of our four organizations, we are the part of the RISE coalition as well. And one of the levels that we have been discussing in the RISE coalition work, the coalition that has been created and joined together. So we are monitoring the recovery. And as Yuriy has mentioned, the recovery is as a multiple faceted project. And we have already met with our organizations, the organizations that are going to be monitoring the recovery, and those are the directions that we have spoken as well. That some is going to be evaluating the usage of the money and the resources of the money. We have the ideas of how we can evaluate the sustainability, but right now we're building these approaches as well. So how to evaluate whether those projects are really energy efficient and green, because there's a lot of standards and we will have to make this decision of what kind of standards we're going to be following. Some of the other institutions are going to be identifying what kind of priorities we're going to analyze as well. So it's all very important. So for the civil society organizations, there's a lot of work on both local and national levels for the NGOs and for any kind of active citizens. And what Yuriy has mentioned, the accounting chamber has a very important role. Unfortunately, they're only limited to the local budget. They cannot check how the spendings are made locally and how they only can track the state budget. So I think that there's going to be an important role for the donor organizations as well, so they can support the civic society sector for this monitoring and for their support of the specific project. And there's an important role for the State Auditing Service of Ukraine that are going to be responsible for tracking the procurements. And I think that Transparency International, they have made a big roundtable on how the state agency can change the approaches to analyzing the procurement so that for them to be effective. So once again, we're talking about the multifaceted monitoring, and that has to be done by the different organizations, and they can use the certain capacities and opportunities that they have. But now there might be some limited, but we do hope that they will have more data sets to analyze. And I just wanted to reflect on one of the questions that has been voiced out in the comment section on the anti-corruption. This monitoring and the transparency of the data is very important, so that we will be able to track the anti-corruptional policies as well. And as it goes, the recovery agencies, they're now building the processes for the regional, the branches that Yuriy has mentioned, for us to be able to build the best policies there. And I think that it's very important, and we have the Institute of the Legal Ideas who are helping them as well. So you can go to their page and to see all of those ideas there as well. Yes, I would like to add a couple of sentences as well, maybe for everyone to understand that. When I was talking about what it is going to be monitored and why we have to make this decision, because the toolkit is also going to be dependent on that. Because if I say that let us monitor the usage of money, we have this Prosoro for that, the BI modules with a better functionality, and you're monitoring the tenders. But if we're talking about the budgeting, that's a different role. That's a different role, and the consultation role, we understand how it works as well. But if we're talking about going to save our time, that's what I wanted to say. So we have to understand what it is that we're monitoring, and then we're talking about how it's going to be made. Yes, okay, let us have the blitz for the three of you, for all three of you, just very briefly answers to the questions that we have. So the report says that it's very important to consider the points of view of the community and the residents of the community, in what way we can do that. And that was the questions from the Q&A, and I'm going to rephrase it a little bit, maybe add up from this question as well. How are we going to be maybe we can use DIA for the control of the state form? What funds? What do you think? Like voting through DIA, for example. Are you for or against? So I have an article on that. I think that that it's an interesting idea because that is an investment tool, and the commissions have to be paying some part there and there, but not the residents of the specific cities. But in the same time, I've spoken about the participatory budgets. Then those projects are the projects that are created and provided by the citizens, and they can vote for that on those projects, and those are they're being also voted for the project. The recovery project from voting Trodia, for example. Well, I do believe that my answer would be no, because it undermines the principle that we said, the principle of prioritization. When we're engaging people in voting, well, the problem would be that, this is the tool of financing the recovery projects all over Ukraine. If we're going to be including the self-choice of the citizens, then, for example, the communities of the bigger city will have more impact. And to regulate it in the best way, for example, like in my territorial community, I would like to have the real impact to choose the project that is important for me. It's really hard to do that when we're talking about just the numbers. But the state budget and the budget of the participatory budget, those are a little bit different things. Roman, what would you say? Voting through DIA to support the recovery projects and to have the allocation of the state funds and maybe some other participatory moments for the community members. But voting in DIA, that's not a participation in the community life. That's, it's just like any kind of internet vote that you're doing. So why not? If we're talking about some kind of a state tools of allocating the money, then we need to have a clear criteria identified there, and only those criteria should be used to minimize the impact, to the subjective impact, even if it's collective impact. So we can use DIA for voting on, for example, should we commemorate certain days, but I think that's not the opportunity to understand how should we allocate the budget. We understand that will be not enough money to cover all of the expenses, so we have to have the element of the healthy competition, and we have to have this element of the added value. So in what kind of effect the money spent will have. And how can we include the point of view of the community in that? For the people that live in the community, how can we consider their point of view as well? Well, using the democratical tools, the tools of both decentralization and democracy. So getting back to the decentralization practices, give the community the more resources that they will allocate and spend on their own. So without any additional reallocations from the central level, like the less central management from like Kiev will have, the better that would be. Yes, thank you, Yuri. I think maybe I will have a not very popular point of view, but maybe I will also benefit with a discussion. I used to be the member of the Regional Commission on the pre-selection for the projects for the state financial support, and I know how it works from the inside. I'm not going to give the commands of how it works inside, because there's a lot of work that has to be done there, but this is a preliminary search. But if we will forget about DIA, if we're not going to be using about DIA, so the voting using digital tools as an experimental project, I would support that, and I would like to see how it works. Okay, thank you. The two final questions. Let me just see the two final questions. The question to Roman, in your point of view, how the recovery energy is going to be developing further on, and how should we stimulate investment to the sector? You started to talk about that, and maybe you can speak more about that, and if we will have some time, we will take some more questions. There are a couple of the different development scenarios, and if it's going to be moving with the integrational scenario, then the development will be more situational development, and it will depend on the more interest for the people, for them to become half or fully autonomous in their energy provision. If we will have additional tools together with this net billing, together with the origins guarantees, and if we will have a specific support mechanisms introduced, especially for the small renewable stations and generation, then we will have a bigger interest, and then we will have the real opportunity for more people to afford that. Right now, because we don't have this kind of monetary and funding support, we don't have this. discounted loans and smaller grants if we're talking about the municipalities and communities. So right now we do not have the opportunity to speak about this kind of a good perspective. So I'm talking about the consumers station. So if we're talking about the industrial production and generation, so there is a lot of existing problems with the financial sustainability, for example, the payments according to the green tariffs that has been postponed. That will also be one of the factors of whether we will be able to switch to the price-based models that will be discussed on the auctions. Yes, thank you. So I think we have just 4 minutes left. I would like to start with a maybe final question, and maybe some of us would like to take this because, I do not have the answer to this question, but the question is very important. So do we have the real program already and the complex solutions to recover the enterprises that has been fully destroyed or have been damaged by the military aggression, or whom can we address? No, I'm not aware about these programs that are supporting the reconstruction of the enterprises. Do you know that of the industry? Yes, unfortunately, we do not know that it's kind of a state programs right now because, yes, the state has a very limited resources right now, and the priority was the recovery of the residential sector and the recovery of the critical infrastructure, because this is something that touches the lives of more people. Right now, we don't even have the clear mechanisms of how we're going to compensate the losses for the businesses. Once again, because the priority has been provided to the residential sector, to the people's life. Once again, there is some opportunities. For example, the EBRD provides the support for the some of the private businesses, mostly to the big businesses, of course. Also, there is some opportunity to have a certain loan from the state, but from the state from the state development fund, and we're talking about the investment credits and loans. That's not compensating the damage, but that's the providing the support for the development strategies. And there has been some amendments provided of how the money being provided to the investment crediting and investment loans, and it will be a new regime there. So those about the companies who have a clear business plans and who have certain collateral there because they need to have a good business plan there. But unfortunately, the businesses should look for financial support on their own, or they can apply to the state office of supporting the entrepreneurship development, and they only can apply for this investment loans. Yes, I would agree to what Oleksandra has said. The government has set out the priority, the reconstruction of the critical infrastructure and residential sector. The most important thing that I can advise the businesses is to try to document the losses of different kinds, because we don't know how it's going to happen next, and we also say that the perpetrator should pay, and we understand that Russia should pay for all of those damages and all of the consequences. So I do hope that in the future we will have the mechanisms on the certain levels that will help the businesses to compensate the losses that we had. Yura, thank you very much. I just wanted to mention that straight away. Speaking about the businesses and the business recovery, if somebody from our audience are interested in the issues of the businesses, then right now on the very, very, very beginning level, we're talking about the providing the insuring of the military risks. It's very important, so that we will start from the lowest level of discussion on this question, would go to a more real form, and so that this insurance would be also be available for the Ukrainian businesses, so they will be able to insure themselves from the military risks, and so the certain damages would be covered as well. So if you're hearing that there's going to be this kind of discussion, or if you know that there's going to be conversation with the policymakers, participate there, do be the advocate for the military risks insuring, maybe even on the international level. And yes, please document all of the losses that you've had, just for us to have the opportunity to have the final bill provided to the Russia. Okay, so that is 5:10. We're really, really being on time. So thank you very much for all of our speakers today. That was very inspiring for all of us. Even we understand that it's very sad sometimes to hear and to talk about certain things as well. I am also really grateful for everyone who has helped us to organize this discussion and to helped us to publish our cookbook. So thank you very much, Open Society Foundation and the Renaissance International Foundation. Thank you very much for being the part of our discussion today. Have a peaceful day and a peaceful night for all of us. Thank you very much. Yes, just a final word, if I may. So, Maria, that you have been a moderator for us today, but Maria is one of our main authors of the cookbook, and I just wanted to acknowledge her as well. And we're really grateful to Yevhen Klopotenko because he had given us the permission to use his borscht at the cover of our cookbook, because we really like this photo. And I just also wanted, we asked him to use this photo, so, and he was really calm to help us to do that. Thank you very much to all of the participants. Yes, thank you very much, and thank you, Yevhen, even though you're not listening to us, but thank you for that as well. Bye bye. Goodbye.